Nick, how are you doing today?
I am outstanding. How are you doing, Amy?
I'm great. Did you ever wonder why I have the S in my name that I always keep there? Let me just tell you a bizarre story. Is that when I was a young lieutenant, there was another Amy Hamilton, and we were both signal officers, so we had to go by our middle initials. How random is that?
Well, it was probably honestly, it was probably the detailers. They wanted to screw with people. I remember my first squadron. We had a Captain Corn, Captain Cobb, and Captain Ham, and I am convinced to this day it's because they all had an assignment due, and the detailers saw their names. Like, I'm going to put a Thanksgiving meal in that squadron.
There you go. Well, as we're opening up and kind of talking about military and current events, I would like to go ahead and I know you want to talk about Japan first. We're going to go over to Japan.
So yeah, last weekend, the new prime minister, and forgive me, I am not going to butcher her name on the screen here, but the new Japanese prime minister, who's been very popular publicly, called a snap election to try to capitalize on that popularity. China tried to influence on it. They tried to put some economic pressure, and that probably ended up helping her even more. So she ended up winning the LDP, the Liberal Democratic Party, ended up winning a supermajority in the lower house of the Japanese Diet, which is going to help her push her fairly conservative for Japan agenda. And one of the big things one of the big implications that it has is for defense spending and for their defense posture in the Far East. If you're not aware, following the Second World War, we basically dictated a constitution to Japan.
And we being the United States of America.
We being the United States, correct. And it included a clause that they were going to be a pacifist nation. They could have a self-defense force, and to this day, that is what their military is called, is the Japanese Self-Defense Force. That obligated the Constitution and subsequent treaty obligated us to step in to defend Japan should it be attacked. But they've been very guarding of their pacifism since then. Fast forward, well, I shouldn't say since then, because over the last couple of decades, as China has kind of become more ascendant, they've been growing a little bit more nervous and a little more interested in reevaluating that pacifist clause. So the new prime minister, and with the help of her new diet, they probably are going to see a lot more defense spending, a lot more engagement through this Japanese Self-Defense Force. Will probably engage a lot more, both regionally and probably a little farther afield, looking at places like India, maybe the Middle East, sending forces to do not combat operations by any stretch, but by any sort of mill-to-mill engagement is something that is new to Japan, and they're doing that to demonstrate that they do have clout and they do have capability, and they're going to try to say, hey, you can't take us for granted, that we can project force, so don't assume that we can't or that we won't. And that's a really big deal there in the Eastern Rim, because going back to World War II, a lot of those other countries still remember what Japan did, and there's some nervousness in Korea and in the Philippines about how this new Japanese system is going to play out regionally.
Yeah, and some really interesting, from a feminist perspective, look at the gender relationships there. That traditionally Japanese very conservative, when it comes socially as well. And so the fact that there is a woman in this role is very interesting in that kind of dynamic. And if people are not tracking, Japan, like many developed countries in the world, also is falling under the declining birth rate. And if you follow me for any of that, a lot of it is, do we need to look at birth rate and economic modeling and say, hey, this is going to be the new normal in the future. So much out there in Japan. But as you know, we've got to kind of keep today going, because this has been a big week in world events, and I'm not sure we're going to get to all of them, but I want to kind of pivot us over to Europe, to talk about NATO, to talk about the EU and changes that are going on over there right now from particularly a U.S. relationships perspective.
Yeah, you almost pulled me down the rabbit hole of demographics there. So I will haul myself back up, because that's another long discussion. But yeah, EU. So they're holding the Munich Security Conference. It's an annual thing. Secretary Rubio is representing the United States, along with a congressional, well, not just congressional delegation. The U.S. Democratic Party has, I think, Governor Newsom and at least Congresswoman AOC. There might be one or two more Congress people that are there representing an opposition view from the United States. And I want to take a quick moment here to talk about how the U.S., U.S. parties have approached this. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc was seen by both sides as an existential threat. So it was a very, very unified front. No matter who was in the White House, the party in opposition was going to toe that line. So since the Cold War has ended, and the respective parties, whoever's in office, has approached it with more of a values-based approach from their perspective and their party's perspective. There's been more and more pushback and more opposition to foreign policy from the opposition party. Right now, we're seeing that in the form of the Democrats saying, you got to remember that Trump isn't going to be here forever. So don't completely turn your back. This is what the Democrats are saying. Don't completely turn your back on the United States and burn the bridges. But that said, right now, we've seen how President Trump has treated NATO and Europe, being very aggressively interested in acquiring territory and in dictating policy, and in chastising our traditional allies for what he perceives as freedom of speech violations against the European right wing and that sort of thing. So they
we covered a lot of that last week when we were talking about the Olympics and the athletes, and so definitely all ties together there.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And so you're seeing Europe kind of take the first steps to saying, hey, maybe we need to be a lot more responsible for our own defense. And when you see a country or a continent with a whole lot of small states, they're grouped together economically under the EU, but there is no central European military system. Instead, you have a lot of small militaries that work together through NATO, but it still has a lot of inefficient overhead if you have each country having their own complete command structure. So there are some very, very, very tentative steps, and I don't want to oversell this, but there's a very tentative steps about creating a pan-European military to shoulder more of the burden of their own defense. And then not necessarily just defense, but being able to say, hey, now we have the capability to project our influence and our power both regionally and potentially globally. So maybe we need to do that because they are absolutely influenced by not just Russia, what's going on in Ukraine and what the Eastern Bloc is terrified might happen in the Baltics, Poland. But there's the migration coming out of Africa is a really big deal for them, and they need to find some way to deal with that. The potential terrorism coming out of Africa can absolutely affect Europe. So if there's a pan-European way to address that, then that's a positive for them. And if it's, I will say that if they're not as reliant on the United States to do those sorts of things, it's kind of a positive for us too. I do want to take
about the significance of the SACEUR still being a U.S. position, but all three components now falling underneath European leadership for the first time ever.
Yeah, so SACEUR, the Supreme Allied Commander Europe, has been an American a 4-star general since Eisenhower first held it as a 5-star general during the Second World War and immediately after the Second World War. We have held it since then because we do have the preponderance of forces. Yes, we are forward projected into Europe when we're doing these things, but the lion's share of the resources are still going to come from the United States. The fact that we're looking to burden share a little bit more, that we're willing to open up and have some allies kind of take more of a leadership responsibility in the component perspectives, and that being like the Navy, Army, Air Force, Space Force, Marine Corps, really shows that we really are trying to burden share. We're trying to have Europe be more responsible for their defense and their power projection if necessary.
Great. A lot going on there in Europe. I want to take us over now to the Western Hemisphere, and we can discuss the unprecedented actions of Hegseth, who went ahead as the Secretary of Defense. That's still its congressional name.
Yeah.
So the action that happened there in the Western Hemisphere, and the fact I think there's some messaging that he did that instead of going to NATO and Europe, and so if we can kind of move over into this world.
so pivoting to the Western Hemisphere, another radical change: Pacific Rim to Europe to the Americas. Secretary Hegseth and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dan Kane, hosted from what I understand to be the first ever, I may be mistaken there, but I understand to be the first ever gathering of all the defense chiefs. And this is by defense chiefs, I mean the senior most military officer in their military from all of the American countries were hosted in DC to hold talks. Secretary Hegseth's messaging was, hey, we need to have a unified front to guard against outside influence, and then we need to work together to do internal defense. The outside influence he means is absolutely China. China has a lot of inroads into Latin America right now, and it's because that we have neglected them for so long. So China has stepped in. They've done a lot of infrastructure building. They've done a lot of investment, and it's not altruistic by any means. They want to get resources. So if they need cobalt for something or lithium or what have you, and they know that those resources are found in Latin America, they will go in and buy the rights or lease the rights, and in exchange maybe they'll build a big port or some rail stations, so something like that. They'll try to make it a little beneficial to the host nation, but China's still getting the lion's share of the benefit there. So
yeah, I've definitely observed China in the past investing heavily in the IT infrastructure, because when they invest in that infrastructure, then they have access into that infrastructure.
Yeah, and if I can go down a rabbit hole on that real quick.
Go ahead.
What they do is,
well,
so
we're
they
too serious. It's supposed to be cocktails and current events. I feel like we're a little current event heavy today. Nick, what are you drinking? How are we? I
just have a beer today.
What kind of beer are you drinking?
It is a oatmeal stout. I am it's cold and dark and rainy, so that's stout weather to me, and this is warm and not warm, but it's comforting.
Kind of a toasty oatmeal stout. And is this one of your own home brews, or is this a?
No, it is not one of my home brews. It's from a brewery in Ohio. Forgive me, I don't remember which one.
Okay, little brewery in Ohio. Shout out to you. I am drinking some wine in one of my book hoard glasses. So welcome in the book hoard universe. So a little tangent. I have no idea where you're going to go. I took us on a big around the world.
So China's modus operandi for most of their Belt and Road Initiative, and before that they called it the Silk Road, something like that. One Belt, One Road. I think it was the One Belt, One Road, and then they changed it to the Belt and Road Initiative. But the way they do this is they go to a country, pick a country, doesn't matter which one, and they offer them a loan at fairly reasonable rates. But part of the requirements of that loan is they now have to buy all the materials from China, and they have to use Chinese labor to build whatever the infrastructure project is. So let's say you're building a large port in Lima, Peru, which they did. They have a whole lot of Chinese workers come and do the actual construction. All the concrete and steel are coming from China. So China is loaning Peru to pay China to employ Chinese workers and buy Chinese materials to build this port. Now, Peru does end up with a nice port, and it is not nothing. It is something with which they can do trade. But the construction jobs that the Peruvians thought they were going to be able to get some of their people out of poverty never materialized. And all of the resources that went into building it all came from China. So it wasn't Peruvian resources that were used to build it. So in effect, China loaned Peru money that Peru had to pay China, and now they're gonna have to pay back the loan. So China gets paid twice. And it's unfortunate that our current global economic system has enabled China to do that. And that's one of the huge criticisms that a lot of the global South countries, the developing countries, have of the rules-based system, is that it's enabled so much exploitation on the part of the richer countries to go in and do resource extraction like this through organizations like the World Trade Organization. They put so many rules in place that it's almost impossible for a lot of the countries to leverage those economic resources to pull themselves out of poverty. So China comes in and offers fewer strings. It's still not a great deal, but it's a better deal, and it's something they can access. So China, going back to where we were talking about trying to have a unified front in our hemisphere, China has exploited these countries, and it's not that they're blind to it. But they saw it at the time as what they had to do. It was the only avenue they had.
Right. Well, that's
So
sort of two evil sort of voting that
yeah, so
continuously has to happen.
the administration is trying in this particular endeavor to reach out and say, hey, maybe we're a better option. And they're doing it. The other part of this conference was General Kane was really focused on what are the commonalities that we really have from a security perspective, and that's transnational crime, which is a big deal across the Americas. So what can we do collaboratively to try to combat this crime so that you can have more control of your borders? You're not having to worry about drug cartels running amok, just destroying your economies and destroying your people. So this is something that they actually do want to work together with us on. And it's the outreach, when I was talking about soft power last week, in order to get a country to want to play with you, you need to speak with them both respectfully, and you have to appeal to what their interests are. So in this respect, we are doing that. We're saying, hey, we understand that your interest is in combating crime. We can help do that. We've done it in Colombia for decades now. It's been on again, off again, successful. Sometimes more so, sometimes less so. I think we're kind of in the ebb at the moment. But that's a template we can use to say, hey, we can do these things. We can work with your militaries to combat crime, to combat the illicit drug trade, so that we can establish law and order, which will help you build a more effective country, a more effective economy, and exercise better governance over your country.
And Nick, we have gone around the world. We are hitting on
yes.
time. I really want to encourage everybody, please like, please subscribe, please join us, ask us questions. I will be doing up a summary article after this. We did not get a chance to talk about the U.S. troops that went over to Nigeria. We did not get a chance to talk about Cuba, Mexico relationships right now, sanctions, which, by the way, I did see that there is a movement in Cuba to do regime change. So that is moving forward as you predicted. I think I'm missing Venezuela, and I do Iran.
Don't forget. I was going to say, don't forget Iran, and then there's the New START treaty, which was the last nuclear arms treaty that we had with Russia, expired this last week. So there's high adventure every day. International relations is a really interesting topic to get into if you're looking for something to study.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Nick. I appreciate your time, and thank you to the audience. We're gonna keep putting together little sound bites and drinking. So thanks to everyone.
Cheers.